Last week, I went to my mother-in-law's house for a family dinner. It was supposed to be a pleasant evening planned for all of us to catch up and spend some quality time together as a family, and both my husband and I were excited for it once we got there. The atmosphere was warm and cheerful, with everyone chatting, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. After dinner, things became even livelier as the adults in the group started drinking. My sister-in-law slapped me in front of everyone, but worse than the slap was my husband taking her side. Refilling our wine glasses and keeping the mood lively, my mother-in-law was the perfect host as the evening went on. At one point, the music started and the adults dancing joined in. My husband and I joined in on the fun. I was swaying to the music and didn't realize my sister-in-law was standing right behind me. At one point, I bumped into her, which caused my wine glass to tip over, spilling the wine all over her dress before I could react. It was a complete accident, and my sister-in-law gasped in horror, and I did the same. She was wearing a white dress, and now it was completely covered in deep red wine. My heart sank as guilt overcame me, and I started apologizing profusely, explaining that it was an accident, but I could tell she was furious. My husband quickly grabbed some napkins and brought them over so his sister could try to dab away the wine. I was still apologizing, trying to help clean up the mess, when she started screaming at me, accusing me of being blind. As we continued to assist her in cleaning up, my husband laughed at my comment, which was intended to lighten the mood, but instead had the opposite effect. As my sister-in-law stiffened visibly, her eyes narrowing as she stared at me with a ninja-like expression. Daggers, and I could feel the tension building as I kept apologizing over and over, desperate to make amends, while she kept reprimanding me, calling me careless and stupid for ruining her dress. In a moment of tipsy humor, I finally replied, "I am sorry, but I don't have eyes on the back of my head. How am I supposed to know you'd be lurking right behind me like a—" My sister-in-law was still screaming and shouting, "How dare you talk back to me? I can stand wherever I want. You should have been more careful." Before I could comprehend what was happening, she slapped me hard across my face. The sound of the slap reverberated throughout the room, and I felt the sting of her hand burning into my cheek, shocking me. I froze, my face now hot with both pain and embarrassment. The entire room fell silent as everyone turned to stare at us. My mother-in-law and father-in-law immediately intervened to try to calm my sister-in-law down. My mother-in-law tried to gently soothe her and take her away so that she wouldn't cause any more controversy. But my sister-in-law was having none of it. Her voice became louder and more piercing. "This dress is so expensive that you can't even afford it. How dare you try to argue with me? How dare you try to argue with me?" she sobbed, practically shaking with rage. "My favorite dress is completely ruined because of you. Do you see this stain? It's not going to come out." She whipped her head back to glare at me angrily. "You're going to replace it, and I'll make sure you pay every single cent of what it costs." Her tone became even more cutting as she added, "But I doubt you'll even be able to afford it with your pathetic salary." She spat out the final words as if they left a bitter taste in her mouth, and the humiliation I'd been feeling was exacerbated. Long after she graduated from college, her husband, who is 13 years her senior and roughly 9 years older than Ryan and me, is a well-established professional from a wealthy family, which puts her in a very comfortable financial situation. She is getting married and has lived a luxurious life while believing that the rest of us are impoverished. What's even more ironic is that she describes herself as a traditional wife, which sets her apart from the rest of us. She spends a lot of time making jokes about how her role in life is to serve her husband. Her status as a TRD wife is a badge of honor, which she wears with pride, but she sees the rest of the world and other people through a prism of privilege and entitlement. I completely understand that her dress must have been extremely expensive. I felt awful about spilling wine on it. I know I should have been more careful, but even though I apologized repeatedly and felt regret, I couldn't help but wonder. Even though I wasn't as wealthy as her husband, I still made a respectable living for my age and didn't mind paying her back. I tried telling her this, but she persisted in her TI rant, and my blood pressure felt like it was steadily rising with each cruel word she spat out at me. Her shrill voice was irritating my nerves, and she was close to my face, jabbing me with her fingers while hurling insults at me. What struck me, though, was how she looked at that moment. Her behavior was so excessive that it bordered on childish, and I was shocked by how entitled she appeared. At first, I didn't realize it, but as her accusations and yelling intensified, something inside of me snapped, and I slapped her back so hard that it completely silenced her. The room had been filled with her shrieking moments before, and everyone froze, including me. Her cheeks flushed deep red, and I looked her in the eye and firmly told her to stop yelling for a moment. My voice was steady as I watched my sister-in-law process what I had just told her. She looked angry, but before we could argue further, my mother-in-law pushed me away from her. she screamed as she began to check on my sister-in-law's face. My husband, who had remained silent throughout my sister-in-law's earlier tantrum, now joined his mother, freeing and scolding his sister. "So that I can talk, I'm going to replace your dress. So stop screaming about how I can't afford this because you've never had to spend a dime without someone else paying the bill." The way they were reacting was almost unbelievable. It was as if my sister-in-law had been shot or seriously hurt. The melodrama of it all was overwhelming my husband, Ray, who abruptly turned on me. His voice was loud, sharp, and full of anger. "You had no right to slap my sister," he yelled. "This is all your fault anyway." She started to cry loudly, wailing about how disrespectful I was and how she had never been slapped by anyone before. "Your sister came up behind me while we were dancing, and I didn't see her spill my wine on her dress. I apologized repeatedly, but what justified her slapping me in the first place?" My voice was shaking with a mixture of hurt and anger, but I was determined to get my point across before Ray could reply. My sister-in-law erupted again, screaming in a shrill voice, "How dare you slap me? Do you even know who you're dealing with? I'm going to sue you for assault. You'll pay for this, Mark." She then turned on Ray and yelled at him, saying, "Shame on you. How can you not control your woman? She has no right to say anything to me after what she did." Without waiting for a response, she hurried off to the bathroom to change my mother-in-law and console her. I was still standing in the center of the room, with everyone talking behind her back and referring to me in some way. At that point, Ray turned back to me, disappointed and frustrated, saying, "You need to go home." His tone was firm and left no room for argument. He added that you shouldn't have slapped her back. In fact, you shouldn't have done anything to her no matter what she did to you, because you were older than her and you should have acted more maturely. I was still trying to process what he was saying, and I couldn't believe my husband was telling me to leave and that you'd done it enough in front of everyone. You've made a scene, and my sister needs to calm down. She can't do that with you still here. My father-in-law added, "You should leave." Nodding in agreement with Rai, I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me, and my face burned with shame as I realized that I was being kicked out of the house by both my in-laws and my husband. I couldn't believe he had chosen his sister's side so completely, without even caring how unfairly I had been treated. I was too upset to argue, so I quickly grabbed my bag, booked an Uber, and left. My mind was racing as I kept thinking about this. I was repeatedly asked, what did I do wrong to deserve to be kicked out of the party? I'd only defended myself after being humiliated, slapped, and insulted. I mean, I kind of knew that my husband's baby sister always came first for him. For instance, when I first met his family, it was a casual lunch, and I remember being anxious but hopeful. My sister-in-law spent the entire meal asking me questions about every aspect of my life, including my upbringing, education, and even my job. She acted as though I wasn't good enough for her brother at one point, saying outright that Gry was such a catch and that he should be careful about getting serious with just anyone. Where was Rye during all of this? Sitting silently, of course. Of course, not once did he speak up to her. It felt more like an interrogation than a polite conversation. I remember being surprised by her noseness. To be clear, both her family and mine come from similar socioeconomic backgrounds, and I was already employed in a field that paid significantly more than Rye earned in advertising. When we were alone after that lunch, I told Gry how upset I was and explained that it wasn't fair for his sister to treat me that way. More importantly, I told him that he should have stood up for me to his credit. He apologized back then, telling me he hadn't even realized how her behavior came across and that he had excused it as her being protective about him. He just let his sister's words hang in the air unchallenged, as though it wasn't his place to step in and defend me. Promised that he would stand up for me the next time, but as the years went by, his sister would repeatedly insult me, sometimes subtly and other times overtly, and Rye would either ignore it or act as though it hadn't happened. When I brought it up, he would dismiss it, saying that I was exaggerating or reading too much into things. I had also let things go because I didn't want to cause conflict with his family. But after I got home, I kept waiting for my husband, R, to return so that we could talk and even argue if necessary to deal with the chaos of the night. But he never did and instead arrived late. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, though, because not only had he refused to come home and check on me, but he was also openly siding with his sister against his wife. He also said that his sister was still upset and that he, his mother, and his father were going to take care of her. As if that weren't enough of a blow, he added that most of his family thought I was at fault and that if his sister followed through on her threats to sue me for assault and emotional distress, he would be forced to support her because she is his family. I know many people in my position might have given in, swallowed their pride, and admitted to something they didn't truly believe, all for the sake of maintaining peace or preventing further conflict. But I couldn't because I knew deep down that I had done nothing wrong. Yes, the wine spill had been an accident, but I had apologized numerous times, and the slap I gave my sister-in-law wasn't unprovoked. Rather, it was a reaction to being humiliated. He told me that I needed to offer his sister a heartfelt apology that would pacify her enough to stop her from carrying out her legal threats. If anyone should have been apologizing, it was her. She had slapped me first, and her entitled, cruel behavior had escalated the situation. I knew that if she filed the lawsuit, her claims of emotional distress would be laughable at best given the circumstances, and it was clear that her threats were nothing more than a power play to get me to ask for her forgiveness, to stroke her wounded ego. However, it was Ray's actions throughout that entire ordeal that hurt me the most. He had demonstrated throughout this entire ordeal that his true loyalty was to his family and not to me. The fact that he could so readily support her even after everything I had gone through spoke volumes. He had not once inquired about my well-being, checked on me, or offered any consolation. Instead, he had spent the night blaming me for everything, acting as though I was the only reason for the chaos. When I woke up the following morning and my husband was still not home, I made the decision to pack my bags and leave the house without leaving any notes or explanations. And by the time Rai returned home and realized I was gone, he must have been shocked when my phone began ringing with his calls. So I picked it up, and he demanded to know where I was. His voice was full of anger, with no trace of worry or sadness. He shouted that he hadn't expected to return home to an empty house, and that he was furious that I had left with all of my belongings. Then, as if to justify his rage, he proudly declared that he had worked so hard to persuade his sister to accompany him to our place, and that his grand scheme was to apologize to her in person, so that the whole matter could be settled. I couldn't help but scoff. Remaining composed, I informed him that I was going to my parents' house and that I had no plans to return anytime soon because I had a lot to think about. I'd also clarified that I would not be apologizing to his sister for something that wasn't my fault, but I added that I would be more than happy to listen if she wanted to apologize to me for her actions. Naturally, didn't sit well with him. He claimed that, as his wife, I couldn't just up and go like that. He demanded that I return home right away, but I refused, telling him that if his sister wanted to proceed with her baseless threats to sue me, I told him that she was more than welcome to try. I told him that I would hire my attorney and fight her in court if needed. At this point, Rai lost it, using several foul words that I don't even want to repeat here. I'm currently at my parents' house, and I told my parents what happened. My dad is totally on my side and has even reprimanded Rai for not defending me, but my mom feels that I shouldn't have left my husband's side without first speaking to him, and that communication is the key to moving forward. I looked up the dress's price online and sent my sister-in-law the money in the hopes that this would stop her complaints about it. I know many of you didn't want me to reimburse her, but I would rather not over anything because I did ruin her dress, and I always intended to make it right. I would also like to clarify a few things because they keep coming up in the comments. First of all, as a woman, I know when another woman is purposefully trying to get under my skin, and my sister-in-law has always had this odd need to compete with me from the beginning. Even though I've never considered her a rival, it's obvious that she is envious of me for something. I'm not sure what it is, but I suppose I could have built a successful life and career for myself, unlike her. I didn't marry a wealthy man to afford things or a comfortable lifestyle. I've worked hard to earn everything I have, so I suppose she resents my financial independence. My sister-in-law married a wealthy man and appears to rely solely on him for her life, even though he provides her with everything. She has complained to us in the past about not being able to go out with her friends or wear certain clothes that he doesn't like, but I don't feel sorry for her because this is the life she has chosen for herself. She enjoys flaunting her opulent lifestyle, constantly reminding everyone how fortunate she is. She brags about her trips to exotic places, the designer clothes and handbags she purchases, or how she doesn't have to worry about work because her husband takes care of everything. Second, my sister-in-law's husband was not at the dinner party that night. He usually doesn't attend any of our family events because he is too busy working, and the few times I have met him, he is very level-headed. So I'm sure if he had been there, my sister-in-law would never have slapped me in the first place, and he would never have allowed her to throw a tantrum like that. Despite everything, she spends her days relaxing by the pool, getting her nails done, or doing Pilates. Last but not least, after reading the hundreds of comments on my post, I can't help but agree with everyone. My husband has been a gaslighter for years. I chose to put on rose-colored glasses and ignore the patterns that, in retrospect, have always existed. In reality, he has always put his family before me, and I've let myself think that's just the way things were meant to be. For instance, we've always celebrated Christmas and New Year's with his family year after year, even though I've repeatedly asked him to take turns, and it always feels like my needs, my family, and my traditions don't matter as much as his, and in those moments I've always been made to feel guilty for wanting something different. I'd also blame myself for how things have turned out because I've let my husband control my life for a long time. He has also consistently gaslighted me by saying that his family comes first, and insisting that every time I've brought it up, I should compromise and put his family before mine. Last but not least, my mother is kind of siding with my husband because she thinks I shouldn't let such a trivial issue like my sister-in-law being rude or toxic interfere with our marriage. She doesn't understand how this issue runs and how much it has affected me. She doesn't see how my husband's behavior has worn me down over time. His subtle manipulation has always kept me in a place of doubt, and I've always wondered if maybe I was being too demanding or unreasonable. However, I'm glad I came to Reddit with my story, and everyone here has finally opened my eyes to the truth. Nevertheless, she does admit that my sister-in-law's slap was entirely incorrect. Update 2. Nearly 2 weeks after my last update, I felt that I needed to finally confront him about the situation. When we finally met up, Rye began by apologizing, which caught me off guard because, to be honest, I hadn't expected him to do so at all. He told me how pleased he was that I had reimbursed his sister for her dress, which is precisely what I had been waiting for, a sincere acknowledgement of it. However, Rye immediately apologized to me and then said that it was my turn to apologize to his family. He explained that I still owed his sister a proper apology for humiliating her in front of everyone, and that his mother and sister had effectively threatened to expel him from the family unless I apologized to her. I looked at him in shock and asked him if she would apologize to me for slapping me first. He then attempted to defend her actions by claiming that his sister was a little inebriated and that witnessing me spilling red wine all over the place, I couldn't decide whether I was more hurt or angry at how little he seemed to understand what I had gone through. I told him that although I was sorry that I had slapped his sister back, I apologized for standing up for myself. I wish he had supported me in front of his family, but he didn't, so I had no choice but to defend myself. He claimed that anyone in his sister's position would have reacted the same way and that I should have just kept quiet and accepted her reaction at that moment. His repeated failure to defend me and his willingness to let his sister treat me like trash had made me realize something very important. I couldn't be with someone who didn't respect me. I then listed all the times he and his family had mistreated me over the years and how each of those moments had made me feel. I told him that as my husband, if he couldn't even be there for me, I would have to make accommodations for him and his family and keep myself small in front of them. I did this because I believed that love meant compromising, adapting, and supporting one another, even if it meant sacrificing my feelings at times. Rye claimed that he loved his family and didn't like to argue with them, especially his precious sister. He said that since I was his wife, he felt he could explain to me why it was important to him to maintain peace. That comment infuriated me, so I told him that being his wife didn't mean I had to put up with disrespect or mistreatment every time he remained silent. It felt like he was putting his family before me, and I was sick of being second in my marriage, as if it wasn't already when I was shocked. Rye explained that his mother had essentially uninvited me from all future family gatherings at their home because she didn't want me around them anymore. He claimed that this was fine because I didn't like his family anyhow, and that going forward, I could spend Christmas or New Year's with my own family as I'd always desired while he would be with his. I laughed at how self-centered he sounded, and I told him that I had been considering my options for a few days, but talking to him made it very clear that I wanted to end this marriage, and he looked shocked by what I had just said. He claimed that I was being overly emotional and that I was taking things too far over something so unimportant. Then he said, "Okay, fine, you don't have to bring up divorce. If you don't want to apologize to my sister, I'll talk to her and convince her to let it go this time since you seem so stuck on this. But next time, don't ever slap my sister again." I told Rye that I couldn't be in a relationship where I wasn't respected, where my feelings weren't taken seriously, and where his family always came before our marriage. Since then, Rye has been sending me voice notes begging me not to proceed with a divorce. He keeps telling me how I'm ruining our marriage and how he can't imagine living the rest of his life without me. My lawyer will be getting in touch with you soon. You're free now to spend the rest of your life taking care of your mother and sister, just like you've always desired. I have muted his updates for the time being and will continue to ignore him in the future. Since I met with my husband a few days ago and requested a divorce, my mother-in-law has been texting me nonstop. She says that I have no right to simply leave her son because I'm causing him unnecessary suffering out of spite. She firmly believes that I should make amends by moving back in with my husband, even if I'm unhappy in the marriage, and immediately apologize to my sister-in-law. That's why I sent her this message today, Margaret. I've already met with a lawyer, so this divorce is happening whether you like it or not. Whether this is a warning or not, I'm more than capable of exposing you and your pampered daughter on social media now that I don't care about your family anymore. You and your daughter have done nothing but bully me throughout this entire marriage, and I have screenshots to prove it. Don't test me, because your son will be alone now because of you. I hope that the next time he brings a woman home, you'll think twice before treating her like trash. My mother-in-law has read my message but hasn't dared to respond, so I suppose she's finally realized that I'm done playing around. Due to her being prohibited, my sister-in-law cannot even get in touch with me.